I'm Jonah Comstock, editor-in-chief at pharmaphorum, and today I'm joined by Mohit Manrao, senior vice president and head of U.S. Oncology at AstraZeneca. At the time we're recording, ASCO, the big cancer conference in Chicago, hasn't happened yet, but when you see this, it will have, or it will be just wrapping up. And we're going to talk a little bit going into the biggest cancer conference of the year about what's happening right now in oncology, both broadly and at AstraZeneca. So thanks so much for joining me, Mohit.
Thank you, Jonah. Thank you for having me, and it's great to talk to you again.
Yes, and this is, by the way, the second time we've spoken. There's an interview we did back in 2023 that you can find on the website, and we'll link that in the description if you want to sort of compare and contrast. That said, Mohit, how has this year been for you and for AstraZeneca?
Jonah, it's been great, and it's been great from starting from a patient perspective. There's so much advancement coming through, and so many new options for people diagnosed and living with cancer. And I actually see right here as we get to ASCO, we have had 4 positive phase 3 pivotal trials that are all practice-changing, practice-informing, as well as multiple approvals of new drugs and LCMs that we've had in this early part of the year, which is great. And also from a financials perspective, we had a strong growth in Q1, which continues to build on the 21, continues to help us to build on the 21 new molecular entities that we have being studied currently in phase 3, but also continues to support the expansion of our 7 products that we have in market with 28 indications. So all in all, I think very strong performance from a patient, from a pipeline, as well as from financials perspective coming into ASCO.
And what about in terms of acquisition? Have you guys been continuing to build your portfolio and your pipeline that way?
Yeah, Jonah, as we spoke last time, I think the focus has been truly to build an armory of different modalities that we can, really look at our different patient populations to support with, but also look at combinations. And in view of that, that involves both building different modalities that help to kill cancer cells directly, and as well as those that activate the immune system. And you would have seen in the last 6 months, there's a huge activity, either in-house or external acquisition, whether it relates to radiopharmaceuticals that we acquired Fusion, or cell therapies, where we had a few companies that we had acquired, including Gracell very recently as of end of December last year, but also our own pipeline moving forward, as you may have heard, with 6 of our own ADCs in clinic now, as well as our new bispecifics, the immune bispecifics that open up a whole array of window of helping patients have more deeper, durable responses, and ultimately eliminating cancer as a cause of death. So there's a lot of advancements and progress on multiple fronts, and some of this will be at display at ASCO as well.
Yeah, so that's a great segue. We talked last year about how there's these sort of different fronts in cancer care and in immunology. There's your targeted radiotherapeutics, there's your ADCs, there's obviously cell and gene, it's a whole separate thing. How do you see that having sort of changed since last year? What do you think out of that are going to be the big stories at ASCO? What kinds of modalities are going to be in the spotlight?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, ADCs. We are truly seeing the promise of ADCs, and we talked about the promise of ADC being able to eliminate or replace, I should say, traditional chemotherapy, which of course has been effective, but also has with it different side effects. So to being able to replace it with antibody-drug conjugates that truly deliver cytotoxic payload where it matters. We are seeing that transformation across multiple tumors, and HER2 will be at display. And we just had the first pan-tumor indication approved earlier in this year, which is exciting for those patients with HER2. So you see many of the ADC landscape coming in. But not only that, we talked about it last time, the power of using direct cancer killing with ADCs and the immune activation with IO agent. The combination of that can unlock a lot of potential to drive deeper, durable responses to ultimately talk about cure. And proof of that would also be, seeing those things come out at ASCO on how these things are synergistically adding value in terms of doing what we want to do from a patient care perspective. So that's one thing of ADCs and IO next agents and the combinations. The second, I would say, is a big theme. I would say is cell therapies, and not again cell therapies. We have seen that in hematological spaces it works, but and it's starting to transform care there. But also there's real need for making it potentially off the shelf where supply doesn't become an issue, and so there's progress on that front. But very importantly, to bring it into solid tumor. So you'll see trends of those kind of really transforming care for this. And the last I'll say, which is really a core part of our strategy, but which is what is ultimately needed to also drive cure, is to move into earlier lines. Earlier lines, not only to identify, detect, and diagnose patients early, but being able to have curative intent therapies available that will drive cure. And I call it Super Sunday. I hope to see you there on Super Sunday, where we'll have 2 plenaries back to back on lung cancer in early disease. So our strategy at display on how we are truly transforming outcomes for those patients in earlier setting, which brings to the imperative not only they need to get those treatments. So I hope from Monday onwards, and when guidelines update, when FDA approvals happen, the conversations in clinic will change. But very importantly, an imperative for everybody in the ecosystem to help drive screening and early detection. So yeah, those are some of the trends I'll say emerging and science moving, but also what proof points you'll see at ASCO.
I want to talk more about screening in a minute, but just to follow up on what you just said, when we talk about these early intervention, these treatments that work well later, but way better earlier. And I remember we saw some abstracts and some presentations to that point last year from different companies. But how do you manage that from a development perspective, where the sort of the norm and the expectation is that experimental treatments will be used on patients who are in, more dire straits and therefore in later stage? How do you sort of work the system so that you really can get in there and see how these drugs work when you administer them early?
Yeah, Jonah, it's truly we put one of our core values at forefront, or I would say many of them, but 1 or 2 are absolutely critical in this space, is following the science. So if we believe we have a drug that we have an identified population that will benefit, we got to start, of course, start in later lines to see the first in human benefits of that happening and the risk benefit ratio, but then very quickly moving forward. So I'll give an example of osimertinib. We started with into 2020, 15, we had our first approval in a very late line, heavily pretreated T790M population. But around the same time, as soon as we saw that it works in EGFR and can be broader, ADAURA trial in early stage resectable was started, which opened the doors for the cure rates that ADAURA showed last year at ASCO with 5-year OS data, right? At ASCO. But at the same time, there is example with BRCA. The moment we identified it, the first approval happened in ovarian in 2014 in late line setting. A breast cancer early adjuvant trial was started, right? So being able to first and foremost identify the right population, see the benefit, and then the innovative industry we are in, we have to take those risks and start bigger trials that will take longer time in early setting to be able to do that. So the development process goes hand in hand, but there's a balance of how much we know the biology, know the right patient population, and how quickly we are able to move things. And as all these trials started pretty much in parallel to as soon as we had the right signal for the right population, even though it was very late lines, to then take the call. And right now we are doing exactly the same with our bispecifics and ADCs, where we are starting early trials with some of our drugs. For example, our TROP2 ADC, you had seen the data at ESMO with TL01. We're starting early stage trials with that already, even though the drug is still not on market, because we have seen those signals and we need to start now to benefit those patients.
Yeah, last year when we spoke, you talked a lot about screening and diagnostics, and I appreciate that because it is an important piece of the puzzle that I think can easily be overlooked when we're really focused on therapies, treatments, cures. But when we talk about precision medicine, you can't do it if you don't know exactly what kind of cancer somebody has. Well, let's not just talk about it, AstraZeneca, but how is the industry sort of making progress on that side of things, and what still is kind of standing in the way as a challenge to getting people, one, just screened earlier generally, so they know they have any kind of cancer, and two, being able to screen them on the level so that we know exactly what what genetic expression is, which drugs will work.
I so wish, Jonah, that there was just one, two barriers that got in the way that we all could get behind and solve. I mean, those barriers are numerous, and for any specific individual, they are very personal, right? So it's a very big problem. But at the same time, I'll say the way to solve that is collaboration and uncovering what are the different issues at different point in time. I'll give you a very and this is a survey we did around World Cancer Day in February. We published that, and since then we have activities around it, where we looked at and actually ACS came out with the report that this is the first year where in the US we'll cross the 2 million mark, right, from a cancer diagnosis perspective, and it's rising in the younger populations, and there are 4 out of 6 cancer types where the incidence is rising are screenable. So I remind people always that cancer today is becoming screenable, detectable, and treatable, right? And thus we got to do a lot of education to our society, public about that, but at the same time solve the challenges. And those challenges, I say, let's take example of lung cancer. It could be the socioeconomic determinants of health. It could be nihilism for certain, right? Oh, people don't want to know because they have a smoking history. At the same time, there are so many people, and lung cancer, I remind people, is not only a smoker's disease. It can happen to anybody who has got lungs, right? So from that perspective, there are so many people who have no smoking history but are risk at lung cancer or actually get lung cancer. So there's a totally different challenge for those because there's no screening available for those, right? How do we support them and identify data? And then there are structural barriers that get in the way in terms of insurance, reimbursement, distance to a screening center. Oh, you got to a screening center in terms of follow-up, people lost to follow-up and challenges around that. Oh, you got a follow-up, but then you didn't get the right diagnosis, or you didn't have the coverage for the future tests or biomarkers to be able to predict those. So there are n number of challenges that are coming in. I think what we need to do is first and foremost, really truly at a zip code level, at a population level, at a state level, or a health system level, identify the biggest barriers and try to uncover those and cross collaborate across the sector to move those. And I can give some examples on how we are doing it with our partners across the ecosystem. And the second, I think what we need to do is remove structural barriers that get in the way. And there are so many policy work, legislative work, but also a patient advocacy work that can happen there to remove some of those. So I would kind of stop here. We can talk hours and hours on this, but this is something which we must solve as the science moves. And science, data, technology come together. It is truly unlocking opportunities to put cure on the table, but it won't be possible if we don't move into early detection and screening. And maybe I'll leave with the last one thing. Since then, we have actually done a big partnership with National Hockey League on Hockey Fights Cancer to actually educate hockey fans in the community on cancer risks and getting them out there to talk about screening and looking at their risk factors, et cetera, et cetera. Can we do more? Absolutely. And we can't do it alone, and we need many other people to join that force.
So maybe this is a good opportunity. One of the things we wanted to hit in this conversation was a little bit about AI and how it's being used and how it's going to be used in the future. Is there a role, for AI to play in this fight and the screening and I guess also equity more broadly?
Yes. Yeah. One of the things I remind people is you go to every conference, it's so busy, there's so much data, science is moving so fast, and it is such an abundance of hope for how we are going to deal with cancer. The next day, when you go to a grassroots level, there is so many challenges with it because instead of converging the gaps in care, it will only diverge because there are so many other barriers that don't get solved with it. And truly the bridge there could be technology. And I say that, for example, we have hardworking, truly patient-focused care teams, medical oncologists who treat all cancers to keep pace with all of that, to be able to drive the guideline concordant care for single, patient that they see once in 3 to 6 months because of the precision approach becomes a challenge with science moving so fast. So I think technology absolutely plays a role, and it plays a role all the way all the way from, and you talked about equity, all the way from drug discovery to drug designing, to clinical trial design, to clinical trial recruitment, to delivery of medicines on ground and taking care of patient outcomes. And we've got examples, and I think I shared with you last time some of the partnerships we have with AI-based companies, whether Cure AI or Tempus, in trying to help drive cancer screening appropriately. Some of the partnerships we have on improving screening through blood-based approaches, where we are working with, again, AI and algorithms that potentially through a blood-based test, and not us, the companies that we partner with, that can help actually use technology there. We ourselves use AI across our drug discovery pathway, our clinical trial design pathway, our clinical trial recruitment approaches. So technology, AI is absolutely an enabler to solve and leapfrog some of the current challenges we have. In the same breath, it would be right for me to say that while we do that, we have to be cautious of the biases that it can also bring in and really solve for them from the get-go. Because bias also exists today with humans doing all of it, right? So biases are there, and we got to ensure that the AI doesn't multiply the biases. We help solve for those and put right guardrails from the beginning.
So much I want to talk about in what is unfortunately always a limited time. But you mentioned cell therapies when I asked you kind of about the broader trends, and I think it's important to touch on that, especially because of the curative potential. I guess one question is, when we talk about some of the other modalities, you have been very big on the idea of kind of combination, right? With cell therapy, it feels more like it's in its own lane. You're not combining it as much with with these other treatments. So how do you think that landscape is going to evolve as cell therapy does move into solid tumor? Is it going to I don't want to say replace, but is it going to change the need or the priority related to all these other cancer treatments that we've been working on in the last several years?
Yeah, I think, John, the short answer is we will follow the science, and what it teaches us, we will go there in our ambition to serve the patients. But if I step back, what are the approaches? What is our imperative at this point with cell therapies? As I said, it works in blood cancers. There's challenges there, either whether it is supply-based challenges, so we want to bring in cell therapies that have faster turnaround time, better, some patients do give their cells, but it's not enough to bring back those cell therapies individualized for them, solving for those. But also there are certain side effects like CRS, etc., that limit who can get access to it. So solving for those as first part. Second, we want to bring them into solid tumors and off-the-shelf ones. And maybe right now we're not thinking straight combinations, etc. We need to really first bring in cell therapies and see which patients it can actually help and benefit. And actually, you will see at ASCO, one of our own homegrown CAR-031, an autologous GPC3, which has data in liver cancer, solid tumor, showing that it is starting to be effective. So that's part one. And then as science shows us, what do we unlock with those? And actually durable, the response rates could be so high and durable that may actually be enough for most of the patients. There will be certain populations who need more than that. And then there could be either a follow-on treatment or an add-on treatment or monitoring. Like, again, that's where science will lead us. But the first starting point is, how do we do those three things right and get them in solid tumors, and potentially have many patients just use one cell therapy regimen to be able to live their life back as they used to, and not need more surveillance and more treatments from there on.
So, as I mentioned before, by the time our viewers are watching this, ASCO will be almost or fully in the rearview mirror. But at this moment, at the a little bit of a week before, what are you most excited about? Any particular one about presenting, in terms of the data you're bringing, and two, anything you're excited about seeing and learning more about?
Yeah, I mean, I am super excited for the patients, the hope that this conference will generate, and how the conversations will change right after ASCO for many of the patients, because new transformative therapies have moved the needle for them. And that's the biggest exciting part. From an AstraZeneca perspective, There's a lot of data out, that we are bringing there with 110 plus abstracts, etc. But I'll call your attention to the Super Sunday, and I'll say there are three big data presentations happening that day, two in plenaries, and it's a proud moment for us that this is our sixth consecutive plenary presentation at ASCO, which means there's a lot of science our scientists are working on that's coming to fruition for those patients. But there are three data sets that are so meaningful for individuals living or who would be diagnosed with those diseases. So within lung cancer, the two plenaries, the LAURA data, which shows if for EGFR stage 3 unresectable patients who have responded to a CRT and completed a CRT regimen, which is a curative intent regimen, how adding Tagrisso onto that could have a transformative effect on their outcomes. And the data there is such a significant difference between having no maintenance versus the maintenance of Tagrisso, that I think it is practice informing changing at the get-go. And we'll hear the discussant and the presentation talk about it. And it's a huge unmet need area. The second one within the lung is an Adriatic study. Again, for decades, for limited stage small cell lung cancer, these patients have very poor outcomes. They move very quickly through their disease. These are early stage patients, but very quickly they progress. And we are bringing the similar post CRT there in Imfinzi IO therapy, similar to Pacific in stage 3 unresectable non-small cell lung cancer, where the data will again show not only the PFS improvement, but the first time overall survival improvement for those patients. And again, that's a very, very hard to treat disease and with poor outcomes. And again, transformative data showing that this intervention could have an impact on overall survival, and 3-year overall landmark data will be shown, which is phenomenal to see the delta between those who don't get it and those who get it. And our goal would be that everybody should have potential access to this and a choice to be made appropriately. So those are two big data sets in the plenary. And the third one I'll leave is, which is an early morning special late break abstract on DB06. And you may remember 2 years back when DB04, which was for Enhertu post chemo, got a standing ovation at ASCO. That data transformed care for HER2 low patients, the segment that never existed, that created that segment. What DB06 is doing is bringing that Enhertu therapy to HER2 low patients, pre-chemo. So actually, it is in a chemo-naive setting. So they straight get it when they are, moved on from the endocrine therapies. Not only that, a big question when HER2 low was defined at that point was, what's the cutoff? How low can we go? And it also actually shows ultra low data, which we have said in our press release. And by the time this will be aired, I mean, people would have seen that data that is actually as good as HER2 low. So patients, so we would be really changing practice there by bringing it earlier to patients, but also to a population which today didn't have access to it. So incredibly practice-changing data on that Sunday, which I'm very excited for, not only from AstraZeneca perspective, yes, but truly from a patient perspective, whose options change as soon as these are available in physicians' hand and for a discussion between them. So super exciting time for science, patients, and AstraZeneca.
Let me hit you with one more question while I've got you. Last year, we talked a little bit about the Biden cancer moonshot and the administration's focus more broadly on the fight against cancer. We're coming towards the end of this Biden term. It could be the end of the Biden administration. We don't know. I won't ask you to comment on that. But how do you feel about the progress that has been made at that level, and how do you feel about sort of like keeping that going into the future, whatever happens?
Cancer doesn't care who's in office, whether Democrats, whether Republicans, whosoever, with whatever affiliations they have. Cancer keeps moving, and so do we need to keep moving in our efforts. So I think progress has been made, whether it was on patient navigation, which was a huge. There's more work to be done there. Progress has been made in committing for research. We have still a lot of work to do in terms of ensuring the unintended consequences of IRA are removed. We were just at the event at the Hill where we talked about progress made, but also challenges that exist and how do we come together, collaborate, and move those. And again, we'll be at ASCO, and we have actually a patient advocacy group forum. We're all getting together to think about rare diseases and rare cancers and how we can continue to support the innovation there. So there's more work to be done on screening. But I'll say, irrespective of what your affiliation is, cancer affects everyone, and we all need to continue to work. There's progress made, but much more to go. And it's a moonshot, but it all starts with taking the right ground shot. So There's work happening, work more needs to happen, but it cannot be one party, one individual, one organization. It's everybody coming around the table and co-creating and solving solutions together.
Great. Thank you so much, Mohit. It's always a pleasure. I really appreciate the work you're doing over there. And honestly, I'm always just impressed, just given the size of your portfolio and your pipeline. You keep it all in your head. You keep it all straight. You know all the all the different stuff you guys are working on, because it is a lot. But I hope you have a great show, and I hope I'll see you around Chicago.
Yeah, thanks, Jonah. I look forward to seeing you on our Super Sunday.